Once you understand what you're going through, what your ignorance is, and reconcile with that, then you can go forward and be strong for your family and for your children. So education is key, and throughout our journey, talking to parents and experts, if you follow that path, if you arm yourself with love and with education and support, it does get better.
Hey everybody, and we want to welcome you to a very special edition of the Q Agenda. We're in special times that require special measures, and I'm super excited that today for Hot Topics, I'm joining no other than my boy Victor. Hey Vic, how are you?
Hi everybody.
We have so much to talk about, and this is actually the first time that we're together since the beginning of the year, so I'm super excited to see you.
Good to see you too. Happy New Year.
I wish I looked like you. Look amazing.
It's the lighting.
It's the lighting. So Vic, you started the year with some amazing news, and I want to dig into that. So you launched your podcast. What happened? Where did that idea come from? Like, what's going on?
So for years, I feel like, so everyone's always kind of told me I'm very outspoken, I'm very this, I'm very that. So, the podcasting always kind of has been a reoccurring theme. But then last year with quarantine, I know we're still going through quarantine, but it really was like, okay, let me not have all my eggs in one basket. Let me start to try new things and stuff. And I started to invest in it. And then it launched January 1st.
The presentation is amazing. And I love the name, Talking with Vic.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
New York aspect of me.
So listen, I also wanted to talk to you about something else, because I was wondering what your perspective is on this. I love to hear you talk about these things, and I was really wondering, it's February is African American History Month. Mm-hmm. So as an Afro-Latino, is that part of like the culture, or like how do you identify with that? Because then there's like the whole African American and the Afro, like that history, and then we have, as Latinos, we have our own African Afro-Latino history. Yeah. Does it even mix, or do you feel like in two different worlds, or how does that feel for you?
I think for me, I can't speak for everyone's experience being an Afro-Latino, but for my experience, I think especially growing up in New York, I always felt extremely connected to the African American community. And also, I was always the type of person that, like, if you saw me, you weren't going to assume that I was Puerto Rican. Everyone would always assume I was African American. So to me, being American and of African descent, I still feel connected to the history, to Black History Month, because it's so much a part of me and how I'm able to exist in this country even today.
Right.
Because we're always kind of put into these boxes, especially in America.
Totally.
You're either Black, you're white, or you're Asian, but there's so much in the middle of all of that. Like, it's literally not just Black and white.
And correct me if you think I'm wrong, but like one of the things that I learned with the BLM things that happened last year and everything is that part of the problem is like in our education. And I mean, I grew up in Venezuela, so I know like what they teach us history-wise down there. And for Black people, this history starts as like slaves, but all that happened before
starts there. I think that there's an emphasis on that, and I think
Correct.
There's a little bit of kind of the psychology that goes on behind that, but that would literally be like a 5-hour long
a whole other show. But I feel like to start with, it's like I feel that honestly they should go back and scrap the books and go to the curriculums and really start where the Afro experience begins, with like being kings and queens in Africa and how they were taken from there and taken to countries like, like South America and things like that by like the Spaniards and things. But we immediately just jump into like the slavery, into like the...
Yeah. And like I said, there's definitely a psychology behind that. But I think also you make a good point in terms of history. I think that, and I can speak from my experience and kind of like directly to people that are of African descent. I think there's so many similarities in regardless of what direction, you were taken. A lot of people don't know this, but I believe 85% of slaves were taken into Latin America. So most of them to Brazil, but Latin America in general.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to take this into context, especially if you're not of African descent, but you're of Latinx, you're a Latinx person, you're under that umbrella, how much Black history also applies to you and your music and your culture and your food.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Like from the seasoning to like, even if you go to like African restaurants, like the seasoning, the flavors, and then the music. They're gonna tell me that salsa, merengue, and all of this have nothing to do with drums and tribal music that came from Africa. The culture is so entangled, which leads me to like, we weren't even thinking about talking about this, but like, can you imagine? I can't wait to see the contrast of like when Coming to America came out in the 80s, and now that the second part's gonna come out, it's gonna be like two different worlds.
Yeah, no, with everything that's happened, I think we're definitely more aware. And I think that people in general, whether you're Black or not Black, are kind of a little bit more ready to accept the harsh reality of, you know, what it means to be any person of color, but especially a Black person in this country and in this world as a whole.
Well, so much more to talk about. I can't wait. So many subjects coming up this year, but don't go anywhere because you are watching the Q Agenda and we're coming back with more. We're back with the Q Agenda, and we are going to welcome this amazing guest that we have today. I'm so excited to talk to Garfield Wilson. Garfield, how are you doing?
Very happy to be here, and I'm doing very, very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
No, thank you so much for joining us today. We have so much to talk about. So how are you handling, first of all, the crazy times right now with everything happening in the world?
It's been a journey, let me tell you, and it's been a lot of ups and downs emotionally, but as a province here in Canada, British Columbia has been doing a pretty good job. It's been really up and down as far as the number of positive cases and infection rates throughout the country, but we seem to be doing very well. Ontario just went into lockdown out east, but British Columbians are able to continue to operate their businesses and adhere to strict protocols as far as wearing face masks and social distancing. So, and also the film industry is still buzzing here in Vancouver. So I'm very happy about that.
That's great. Well, talking about journeys, you have an incredible one. So much to discuss because you were born in England, but you are from Jamaican origins, and let's talk a little bit about your background and what brought you into the world of entertainment now, and that you're thriving and succeeding.
Well, you know, it started at a very young age. I was born in England to Jamaican parents, and there's lots of music, lots of great food, lots of parties. And all I remember growing up is just being around family and friends. And I remember my dad brought home the double vinyl album of the Jackson 5, and I looked at little Michael Jackson. I said, first of all, I'm going to grow my afro like that. Second of all, I'm going to be just like that kid because he's not much older than I am. So that was a seed that was planted. And ever since then, I've been just this little ham of a performer when I was a kid. And it just progressed from there. You know, I originally thought that I was going to be a singer and a dancer. But, you know, that progressed, you know, into musical theater, and I caught the acting bug. I played Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar in Edmonton, and I was in Hair the following year in that production. And then when I moved to Vancouver, I was in a production of Dreamgirls, which was one of the most unbelievable experiences of my life in terms of the challenges of that musical. And then, you know, just segueing into the film and television, which has been definitely a journey and a half.
Well, you have so many credits. I mean, it's like the yellow pages of credits with all you've done. And the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit, or start with your origins and your background, is because you're a huge LGBTQ advocate. Yes. And as we know, I am originally from Venezuela, and you come from a background that's Caribbean as well. And we know how it's very machista and very, you know, all about like masculinity and you got to be the man, or the women have to be the women and take care of the husband and things like that. So cut to now, you are the proud parent of a trans young girl.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your experience, please. What happened when she came to you and said, Daddy, I feel this way, and your response, and how did you tackle it?
Well, that was, when I look back on it now, it was a very organic journey. And, we, my ex-wife and I at the time, we thought that our child was gay. And because, True displayed a lot of effeminate expressions and was really drawn towards, playing with dolls and wearing wigs and fairy wings and mermaids and things like that. And we sat down one afternoon and watched The Passionate Eye, and this episode, or this sort of documentary, chronicled these 4 kids that were like 5 years old, 10 years old, 14 years old, I think, and around 18 years old, and all these children were trans. And up until that point, we were just having those open conversations with our children about gender expression and just being who you are. We had no idea that this was something that was within True at the time. And she was, I think, 8 years old. And after that documentary and watching those children and their journey, it actually gave her a name to what she was feeling and what she identified with. And she just started crying. And at first she said, I just cannot believe how brave these children are, and how they're able to be that way and be so honest about who they are. And this is coming from someone that's 78 years old. And it really set a light bulb off in her mother and I. And from that moment on, she really identified with the trans community, and that was her expression.
What would be your best advice for those viewers that are watching us that are, right now struggling with this and don't know if their kids are trans, or they want to know how to approach the conversation with their kids or tackle this subject within their families? Well,
it is scary. I'll be honest with you. There are very, very legitimate ups and downs, and you have to reconcile with your own fears and anxieties and who you are and who you want to be, the best version of yourself. And I can't stress enough how important it is to have that support system where you can gather education and understand what it means to be trans, what it means for these children to go through this journey, and to understand yourself, do your own self-discovery. And where we found that light, where we found that inspiration, where we found ourselves to be grounded on stable ground is through therapy, is finding that place where you can have a safe emotional space to be fully expressed. So you can really express your fears, express your anxieties, and reconcile with that in a place that's safe. And once you understand what you're going through, what your ignorance is, and reconcile with that, then you can go forward and be strong for your family and for your children. So education is key. And throughout our journey, talking to parents and experts, if you follow that path, if you arm yourself with love and with education and support, it does get better, and it always does get better.
Well, thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing such an intimate story with us. I'm sure so many of our viewers will relate and will learn from it, and hopefully take your great advice and move forward. But now going back a little bit onto all of your success, so well deserved. So you're coming out of The Astronaut with Nickelodeon, which is a new, different kind of experiment for Nickelodeon itself. What was it like? What's the feedback from it? How do you feel about it afterwards?
I'm extremely proud of this show. I'm extremely proud of this show, and as a father, playing a father to two children, it wasn't a stretch to play this role, this character, Niles Taylor, who is a widower, who has two children that are pretty much the same age as my younger two children, because I've got a son who's 15 and a daughter who's 12. That's basically Martin and Doria in the show. And being a workaholic as I am, this character is a workaholic. And so just to imagine and to ground yourself in the possibility and what that would be like to have your kids shot off in space and possibly never seeing them again, and the life and death, real life situations that would transpire in that story is amazing. And what they've done, Nickelodeon, and the team that they assembled with executive producer and director Dean Ezralite, and then partnering with Ron Howard and Imagine Entertainment, the sets that we got to work with,
I imagine, yes.
The writing, oh my gosh, and the cast that they put together and the crew was such an absolute pleasure. Honestly, the directors that came in, Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek Next Generation is unbelievable. Like, come on, I'm a Trekkie. Next Generation is my jam. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, me too. And to be part of that club, you know what I mean? By relation, it's just, it's fantastic. So that's what an amazing experience. And of course, Snowpiercer is coming back, and it's season 2. So what can we expect?
What I can tell you is that the first season was wrought with tons of surprises and character twists and turns and revelations. And so in the second season, with Wilford coming back, I mean, like, it's just going to be epic. The thing that I love about Snowpiercer is the characters that you follow in their journey. You are constantly surprised as far as how much emotionally you're invested in their journey. And if you don't like them, if you're not aligned with them and you're rooting for them, and then they turn around and surprise you and go the other way. So my character, who is Jack Bukaffi, part of the security team and policing on the Snowpiercer, is in for a ton of surprises.
Garfield, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to stop and chat with us at the Q Agenda, and for being such an amazing father, an amazing artist. So we are huge fans, and we're supporting you, and we're behind you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. Thank you.
We will be back very soon. Don't go anywhere, because there's more Q Agenda coming your way.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, no, it's great to be here. It's really, thank you for having me.
Of course. And are you joining us from Australia?
Yes, I am actually at my beach house, so I'm praying that the Wi-Fi is good. But yeah, we're in a place called Lawn, which is 2 hours from Melbourne, Australia. Yeah.
Oh, that does sound lovely. Can you talk to me a little bit about who Harry was, not only to you, obviously your son, but what he got up to, what he's up to right now for our audience who may not have heard of Harry yet?
He was an extraordinary visionary and poet. He definitely saw life in a way that a lot of humans are beginning to see it. And he just didn't want to be judged. He always went and bought clothes in the girls' department or wherever he wanted to be. And, you know, coming from Melbourne, which is a fairly conservative place, you can imagine that was quite difficult growing up. I think that he always felt quite isolated. He was very courageous in his views, and he created music around this label, the ANTIBOY label, which we released his first album called Glitch in Paradise. The final music video was called Dream, which I'd love your viewers to look at, which starred Andrea Pellick, who is probably one of the most famous trans models. She's also from Melbourne. And it has an array of performers from the LGBTQ trans community who are all celebrating beauty.
Wonderful. And for those of you that are just watching and learning about Harry, what is so phenomenal about this project, and I want to ask you about this too, Jane, is that Harry actually passed away, left this earth much too soon in early 2020. And this is Harry's mom, and Harry's mom has found a way to actually release his music, his projects, and to really see this vision come forward as a labor of love, and also an incredibly artistically. How did you make the decision to carry his project forward after he passed, and how quickly did you know that this was something you could do, and why did you decide to do that?
That's very good questions. Well, you know, when Harry passed away, he struggled with addiction and mental health. And when he passed away, he was just on the verge of signing with a very big manager. And he had just come from Miami, where he had recorded some demos with a very big producer, Red One. And he also had this body of work that had not been released. So his passing was very sudden for us because he was doing well, he was clean and sober. And then, you know, like happens a lot, he relapsed, and then there was all this kind of excitement around him at the time. And it was really difficult for us to just let it go. I think, number one, his vision was so strong that I just felt like it had to be heard. And he was very beautiful as well. He was quite beautiful. And also for me, it was a healing. It was something that was going to help me with my healing.
And as someone who, you know, we know when our loved ones pass, how we try to make sense of it. And we listen to every voicemail. We reach for every little part of them. What is it like listening to your son's lyrics? Because often they're vulnerable and painful. And how is that process for you? Does it help? What do you go through when you listen?
You know, it's a blessing, and it's, I wouldn't say a curse, but his album Glitch was written when he was actually doing really well. He was sober and he was doing really well. But my son also struggled with love addiction. And he wanted more than anything to connect, because I think that's what we all want. When we feel different, we want to connect. And Glitch in Paradise is very much about connection and about the inability and the struggle to connect when you're struggling within yourself. But his latest music, when I listen to it, is more about the difficulty he's having mentally, the insanity he's feeling, and the struggle he's having with addiction. So when I listen to that one, I really feel sad. I feel so sad because it was very close to the end of his life. And that one is very difficult to listen to. But then he's right here. I feel him right here with me. And so whenever as you said, you look for voicemails, you look for some hidden thing that you might not have found. And for me, it's a blessing because I can listen to that music at any time. And my son's spirit is so powerful.
Thank you so much for being here. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in.